Hello, I'm Brendan McNamara, and this is Regenerative. And those are my real groceries, but this show isn't about my groceries. Well, it's about the groceries and about pretty much everything else, too. But I'm going to start with my groceries because, food, and we eat food. And so, I have a few things I have to admit to buying things from across the ocean, but these are, the local kind of co-op. It's not technically a co-op, this one, but the health food store, Country Air, does have a red line banana section, and these are delicious. The kids hate them. Good for smoothies and stuff like that. But really, it's like what I wanted to drive home about this is that if you want to go for organic and sustainable food, a lot of people think it's really too expensive, but that is one perspective. That's just one perspective. It is that way if you go to a store like this one and buy the chips and the processed vegan burgers and every other damn thing. But for certain basic things, commodities, things that you know how to cook, and if you don't, YouTube, and these pre-processed foods are so full of preservatives, not just the artificial ones, but we're talking sugar, salt. They're all sugared and salted up because that preserves them better, and without the crazy chemical preservatives, they have to do that in order to have distributed foods like that are processed, everything. So what I wanted to really drive home is that if you go this other route, you really don't actually have to spend that much. You notice that you spend like the same amount, but you walk out and your arms are heavy and everything you've gotten is heavy. And you look at it and you're like, that doesn't look like that much. It doesn't take up as much volume. And in here, it's because in here is a whole huge bag of oranges, discount, whole huge, multiple bunches of bananas that I can turn into whatever, discount, and, my oats and my actual, organic brown rice, which now Nash is doing trials of, no, not the rice, the quinoa over at Swimmer, at least. That was going on, and the trials were successful. I'm trying to touch base with him to see if production is going to continue on that. But regardless, that's the lesson for today, is that you don't have to spend a whole lot of money, and you can actually feed yourself for weeks. And if you're somebody that's like on food stamps or something, you can make that go so much farther. And your body will be better, and the planet will be better. There's less processing, less energy involved in its processing of these foods that you're going to have to cook anyway. So why not start from scratch? And that's like just basically like all the diets in the whole world. It just, it breaks down to very basic diet but varied, of whole foods that are minimally processed. And that's what you have here. And it turns out that is the cheapest diet. And if you're buying, you buy, your grass-fed beef. There's the Clark beef locally. There's the sausage from Nash's and Clark and from other people locally. Thank goodness. And it's not that much more expensive. I mean, compare it to the price of organic or Angus beef coming out of the supermarket. It's not that much more expensive. And here, look, I mean, you got that material. If you're not a vegan or a vegetarian, hey, I'm a meat eater. I'm not going to stop. Because, never mind. I'm not going there. But we going for CAFOs are screwed up, totally screwed up, killing the planet, killing the ocean. And we're going regenerative farming because even if you're not a person that eats meat or that you feel like killing animals is murder, and you are a soft-hearted enough, evolved enough human in that way to feel that way. And I feel that way somewhat, like I do feel that way. However, there are a lot of farmers, a lot of ranchers, a lot of hunters that will tell you that that's not the point. you don't discover that animals don't have souls. You discover the opposite of that in the process of living life on a farm. And so I guess I did go there. It's a process of giving thanks and using everything to the benefit of the earth, and being humble and recognizing that being is in service to life, of your farm, of you, of your family, of the others of the world, to provide its bodies, and not just being like WAF. Wasichu is sorry, it's a bad word. Takers of the fat, as is currently the way. Stealing from the ocean now with herring fishing to feed cattle and livestock and stuff. And so you can get by on buying very little of that, and I was vegan. I was vegetarian several times for long periods throughout my life, and I make a mean falafel. I'm not kidding. Like, come over to my house for dinner sometime. Anybody. And we're talking like a full-on Greek spread with like, never. I'm hungry. Can you tell? Yeah, there's all this food. Brendan, eat a banana. I'm not going to eat a banana on camera. Anyway, we are living in a time where there's all these different options, and we just have to spread. We have to get creative and leave the past behind and realize that, our betterment is not going to come through scraping that last 15 minutes out of the workday for your financials and hurting yourself and hurting your family. Keep on doing that, and then end up being a dip sheet, stopping and getting stuff at a place or something out of desperation and starvation. Do the planning, do the work, and pick up the goods and combine them into something good, and you don't actually have to spend that much money. You actually spend a whole lot less, especially if you're supplementing with garden, and one of the problems, I've been talking to people for years, and one of the things with gardening is a lot of people literally say, they're like, well, I barely cook. I barely have any time. I barely do anything except for what I'm already doing, and I don't want to get into that. I don't really value that, stuff like that. And I want to drive home that I understand that I've been that way, even though I was raised by a mom that taught me how to cook and taught me how to care for the earth. Something about adulthood just grips you and takes you for a ride, and a lot of people sort of ride that for way too long. I guess that's part of growing up and getting mature, is learning how to not make excuses for yourself and to just step up and do things the right way. So, this has come as a sort of confession for wrong ways, and everybody is involved in this world, and it's hard to not be involved in this world while you're living in this world. But it's very easy, very, very easy to change. And with permaculture and stuff like that, which is not, it's not a method, it's a process, and it's a set of principles. By following certain guidelines, and call them tips, following certain tips, you can make it so that you can actually generate tons and tons, literally tons of food, pretty much for free, and with little enough time, a lot of effort up front, and but less and less time as things move forward and things establishing and perennializing and so forth. Developing microclimates and layers that shield each other, shield themselves. More liquid water in the soil, which fights frost damage in the winter, and all of this, and getting our land back, basically getting the earth back on the earth, as in the sense of some places, and you're thinking restore nature, preserve nature, but literally you look at a lot of places on the earth that we call quote unquote natural, and just like, actually, that particular landscape, oh, you're talking about that particular landscape, or you're talking about that particular landscape. Well, that's, for example, a place where it was desiccated by humans, removing the trees and killing the predators, killing, it's a very long story. It's recently come to just a gigantic boil, literally boiling. I laugh because otherwise I would die. And I want to get into a conversation of why humans develop laughter. That's but it is an important point. Some of the behavior of these people that are setting the policy and creating the things the way that they are, like how the food is priced, for example, and the myths, the social programming, and the methods of control, the things that we just take for granted, the things that when you talk to your friends and family, conservative, liberal, doesn't matter, and they're just like, well, that's the way it is. That's the way things are. Those are all the bell ringers. Those are all the red flag moments where you're like, oh, wait, no. That, okay, obviously deal with that. You would think that logic would ring front and center for most people if you have an endemic problem that hasn't been resolved for maybe thousands of years, like removing trees from hills, like all of this stuff that we've done to end up desiccating landscapes, described by ancient philosophers, Plato and so forth, thousands of years ago, and we're still freaking doing it, even though we have the philosophies. They're the foundation of our civilization, just carefully cherry-picked and edited by a, elitist academic establishment that, makes it ironically so. I mean, like, to break in the gates, to have any clout or credibility, you have to jump through endless hoops in their system and learn all the things that they want you to learn. And plus, if you're lucky enough to get some side time to look into some cool shit, like permaculture, electives, right? That's what they call them. So, definitely there's a lot of change. There's a lot of good things happening on schooling and free learning models, more liberal learning models, not just liberal politically. We're talking about the literal word liberal, as in liberal Western democracy, which, for example, Mr. Big Kahuna doesn't even know, allegedly president of the United States. So we are making progress on education, and there's some hope in the alternative, in the indie stuff. But it really needs to be that, for example, we're going 2020 and we've got all these guys and gals that are coming up, and this big race, lots of conversation happening. Introduce the idea of universal gardening from preschool. Universal permaculture education, ecosystem education, all this talk about climate change. And to be fair, a lot of politicians don't want to talk that because there's not a lot of knowledge out there. Even if these guys have spent, even the best, like Bernie Sanders, spending a lot of their lives in an office and maybe not getting that much dirt on their hands, but still, those of us that do know to speak up about how important this stuff is in the context of climate change, in the context of everything, really, because you have an ecosystem and you have an economy, and the human economy, like it or not, is part of the ecosystem, okay? And if it gets this big, if it gets bigger than the ecosystem runs its limits, the whole thing starts shrinking. Out here in between these two, that's your table room, that's your counter space. Not much counter space, and now shrinking. And look at most of the United States landscape having been desiccated. Lots of hope to the alternative. Lots of people popping awake. Lots of people turning on. Thousands of food forests. Thousands of permaculture farms. Thousands of ecosystem restoration projects. All over this earth. Millions all over this earth, I would reckon. Because whether or not they're on YouTube, whether or not they're on Facebook, a lot of these people don't want to be online. And they're just everywhere. And things are changing, thankfully. And yet they're also not in a very big way. And now is our time to really, really, I hate to call it political. I'm going to call it policy. I'm going to call it policy and philosophy. I really strongly believe that this government and this society should have a policy and a philosophy that's grounded in what's real. And what's real is the ecosystem, is regenerative farming, is anything we can do to restore the trees and the kelp forests and the seagrass beds and the corals and everything, because, climate, fixing the greenhouse gas problem, yes. Fossil fuels ending, yes. All of that, yes. But also, there are ways we could fix that and stop the extinction problem for humans. Lots of ways. So many ways, it's actually hard to think about them happening, because they would tell you that you need to sell your soul and save yourself and kill your own mother. Because it's just too unstable, and the chaos, rather than understanding complexity, rather than being humble and getting back into a meaningful relationship with existence. Just keep drilling, just keep fracking, just keep digging, killing. And for people stuck in this, for humans stuck in this, if you're aware, you're suffering. And if you're not aware, you're still suffering. So, that old thing, ignorance is bliss, not really even a thing anymore. So why not be ignorant? Why not spread? If you're saving anybody, if you think you're saving anybody by being polite, by not injecting this stuff into the conversation when there's quote-unquote normal conversation, why be normal? 1-800, why be normal? Seriously, why? And resistance, whatever. Stand rooted in who you are, in who you're meant to be, in who we're all meant to be. And you know that. It's a really big problem. A lot of people are being told not to know what they know, and not to even talk about it sometimes. Not to talk about it, not to act about it. A lot of social programming. It's very old. Very old programming. It's nothing new. It's never been so blatant, so raw and real and right in your face, and we're all just having to deal with it. So, it's up to you, and you, and you, and you, and you, and you, and me, and everybody to speak the truth that we know is true. From our heart, that's the difference. There's so many ways that this all makes sense up here. And yeah, duh. But if that was all that there is, That was the only thing. Then a lot would have changed a long time ago. People knowing things in their head is different than knowing things in their heart, and the heart has a different kind of knowing, and a different kind of communication, and a different kind of way of being. And there's certain things that it may find completely unacceptable, and you know what those things are. And yeah, heart math, all of these things, you understand that. These people understand that, and have the science to show that there are more neuron connections in the heart. That's why when you feel emotions, deep emotions, they resonate with your entire being. They control your brain. They overpower you. This trauma response, this shutdown, whatever also it is, all the different manifestations of this distance from reality in the head and the heart. And deep down the heart even knows, like when you see pictures of the facilities, call them concentration camps. I have German Jewish ancestry, and I was raised by Native Americans and immigrants. And I'm Irish. And anybody that says that it's okay that basically Ellis Island immigrants have to go and sit in a cage, that we wouldn't like, we've run experiments and we know how isolation in a simple small cage is for a rodent, let alone, can you imagine rats? And we're literally packing these humans in like sardines, and there is a stench, quote unquote. Not cool. Sorry about that. And so we're at this point where, and like, there's a whole lot of people that don't follow this stuff on Facebook, or they care, but they're overwhelmed. There's so much stuff going on. How can you do every single little thing? It comes back to regeneration. It comes back to disclosure. It comes back to all forms of regeneration, all forms of disclosure. It comes back to speaking truth to power. It comes back to the Justice Democrats and the work they're doing with the Wolf Pack and AOC and these people, and what in policy, philosophy, action, regeneration. These are the themes, and these are the means. It all comes back to bringing back connection to what's real, even if that takes the form of, release the Quacken, the guy that, sorry, spacing on the name, but he moved and gave up an investment banker job to go and move to northern Vermont and be a duck farmer. And it has no regrets. And it takes people leaving their tech jobs and their Silicon Valley jobs. It takes people that get recruited from their bar serving jobs and so forth to go and be Congress people, or actual librarians and actual teachers and actual professors and writers and authors, and real people to step up to the policy mic and change policy. And things are changing. They will change. So I obviously kind of lost my train of thought there, and a lot of different deep things, and the most current things. But I told myself that I wouldn't write a schedule or an agenda. I'm still going to have people on the show. I'm going to have people calling in. I've got lots of people lined up, believe me. Wonderful folks. And doing great things. And hopefully even more people. And just to I've been a marketer. Screw marketing. I'm just making good content that reaches people and see how it goes, and that's how we're going to run this thing. And so the free spieling is okay, and I'm in Washington State and I smoked bowls, and I feel like that puts me in my heart vibration, and that's okay too. And things, my discovery recently, and in relating to new friends from Africa that reached out to me through various ecosystem groups, global earth repair groups, and so forth, that are doing earth repair, that are doing permaculture, where they are teaching people. Raymond Arenda, Fidelis Nang, reaching out to me, and I discovered through this process that people are like, these people on the internet, internet, friendship, but the fetus, as it's developing, develops the heart first and then the tongue before the brain is made. And I feel like that's significant in understanding and how open relating contributes to reaching people. So my experience through ceremony, through working in business, through having a family, through gardening, all of my life has been that when you guard the heart and veil intention, relationships are not as authentic. Your life is not as valuable. Relationships are not as valuable to you. There's a point to having boundaries, but I've discovered through relating to my new friends, that to be open-hearted, and in that intentionally holding that space in like a meditative way, opens a lot more gateways and engenders trust, and really creates a feeling on both ends of camaraderie, brotherhood, universal understanding, being on the same page. And that's what the heart does. So in this experience, and this is kind of an experiment, and thus will be an open-ended heart song of frequency vibrational increase. And that sounds like a lot of woo-woo, but literally, scientifically, socially, the frequency is increasing, the frequency of events. The internet creates it so that we have this infinitely quick response. Things are happening in real time. We don't have to wait for newspapers. We don't have to wait for the horse to ride across the country, or the ship to cross the ocean anymore. Things are quickening. And so human consciousness obviously needs to quicken in order to survive, because the magnitude of the decisions we're making in our inexperience are such that our cleverness is getting us into trouble, obviously. And we're at the limit of what material understanding can give us, pretty much, when you are at the point as a species where your material technology is overwhelming your ecosystem. You need spirit. You need, what is that? You need to have a new value of what is sacred. Science has made it that the religions and the old tribal modalities and the old tribal mentalities, even if we are still getting inspiration from them, make it so that a lot of those are getting thrown out, or at least in a secular, at least in a practical way. And people have this, call it cognitive dissonance, where they're living and they have a moral construct, even if they have a moral construct, and yet what comes out of their mouth and their head is different than what comes out of their heart and their actions. And that's not good. It's been going on for too long. Obviously, we need to have a re-establishment of what's truly sacred. In my opinion, humble opinion, what sacred is the deep mystery, is the fact that you have something that you know that is critically valuable, cannot be replaced, contributes directly to your well-being, from which you derive all of your sustenance, etc., etc. And it's too complicated, too complex. Alan Savory would note the distinction, too complex to understand fully or manage fully, or even to have the hubris to think for a second that it is something that could be controlled. But it is because it is a wild living heart, this planet, with all of its organs and all of its facets, is this wild living beast of a thing, and you cannot try to control it. Trying to control it is killing it, and is thus killing us. Even those billionaires that have their arcs, they're going to wake up on a dead world that's going to stay dead for thousands of years. Millions, maybe. Talking nematodes and whatever bacteria and gamma-eating scum would live there. Io, pretty much. And you can't do that. You just can't, because lions, trees, orcas, fish, birds, what we're looking at is, I support Extinction Rebellion, support that, except and insofar as I support any action that gets people aware. However, that particular action may be marginalizing people, definitely creating a new category of eco-terrorism whereby they can just pummel people that already know through the corrupted justice system, through the criminal justice system, especially if you're black, especially if you're Latino, especially if you're Muslim or young, and so it's not a viable option for a lot of people with kids, for a lot of people with lives, for a lot of people whose lives and reputations would be ruined by the reaction to that kind of action, and that doesn't make it okay, and that doesn't make it so that it's not important to do something quickly, drastically, to raise awareness. But I was a part of Occupy. I was there. I saw people getting beaten. I was part of the line. I did that. And I shifted gears. Not everybody, but lots of people shifted gears after that because they had to. They went into the SEC. They went into regenerative farming. They went into solar work. They went into political and social work. They did things to go and change stuff, realizing it was needed, realizing the quickening was happening, and we were looking at a brick wall we're running into, and did the thing. So, incentivizing carbon in the soil, incentivizing planting trees, or just going and doing it, shifting our lifestyle. And that's all head stuff. Getting in the heart, back to getting in the heart. I have to remind myself, obviously, into the heart as a way of relating through this platform, through anything, and touching base with what's true in your heart when you see current events, when you hear people talking, when you're watching the president, when you're watching the world, but also when you're listening to nature and when you're gardening. And there's this heart, and if you do it for long enough, and I don't want to sound crazy because I'm Western society and mental health is so messed up here, but God forbid I be crazy, but if you listen to your heart for long enough, it becomes a voice. And that voice, I feel, from my upbringing and my spiritual background, which I'll talk more in depth about later, maybe with help, is that there's an actual presence there, and there is an actual spirit there. There's an actual intelligence there, and it's connected to who you are in the future, maybe now, future, past, before, after life, higher self, if you want to call it that, greater spirit, if you want to call it that, great spirit. And if you're patient, and if you sit there and it does become a voice. So when I, more about my childhood background, but in my early 20s, I went off the deep end and quit my job. That was supposedly the best job I could have gotten out of high school in tech, and I thought that I had to do nothing with the status quo or that kind of work or anything. And I started asking questions about what is the true nature of reality. Why is the world the way that it is? Why are so many people devoting so much time and energy to defending and working in a system that's killing them, ruining them financially, because they have to, because there's no other option, because of the mortgage, because of the rent? A lot of those things are true, but why deeper? Why is it structured this way? Who's in charge here? Hello, please, Earthling, calling who was ever in charge. This is crazy. And I'm not crazy, but y'all's crazy for thinking I'm crazy for thinking this is crazy. Koyaniskatsi. It's a word I discovered shortly after, and it's the Hopi word for crazy world. Unreality. Johnny Mnemonic, if you've ever seen that. Blade Runner. So many dystopian future memes coming up to mind when just living life these days. Again, if you're aware, you're suffering. If you're not aware, you're also suffering. Unless you're aware and suffering, and realizing that suffering is your choice, right? It's still painful. But there's a lot that Buddhism can do to help. And to think that they didn't know what it's like right now, whatever, shit. I mean, if you lived through some shit, and wars, and starvations, and plague, and famine, and that's where many stories come from. That's where biblical and all these things come from. And so I believe at the basis of every, I don't want to get into too far of my upbringings, but I had so many. That's the point. I had so many at the same time. Thank my mother for that. So many religious upbringings and a cross section of what each one represented. And the stories of humans coming together and what we learned through the dark times. Supporting each other about what really matters. So, religion, isn't the answer, but that combined with what we know in the context of there are many different ways to heal the heart about living in this world and heal the body about living in this world. Heal your family, heal the earth, heal your property, heal your city, your community. It's endless. And it's not just permaculture. It's not just renewable agriculture. It's not just this or that. It's basically everything. It's the quantum physicists learning to talk to the psychologists, and the engineers learning how to talk to the mycologists, and the pioneers learning how to talk to the politicians, and everywhere in between, all along the lines, taking a compartmentalized society in sections and turning it into one conversant, integral, unified collective of infinite variety. In other words, to turn the human society into a polyculture, instead of these variously arranged monocultures. I'm not literally just talking about breaking the borders. Ultimately, that makes sense in an ecological model, but I'm not going there because that's politically borders. But socially speaking, we all benefit from novelty. And that supposedly is the idea of the United States. That is supposedly the idea of liberal Western democracy, is having foundations, that there is a cultural foundation, and upon that foundation and that platform, anything goes. And that platform is treat other humans as you'd like to be treated. The American Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the preamble to the Constitution, which a lot of politicians forget. We the people of the United States, in order to support as a secure, more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense. Common, meaning you don't refuse to arrest this percentage of the population and shoot the other ones, and so forth. If you go back to that, then we're all the same. All this debate about immigration, ecology. I'd like to see a society where ecology is not a word. Sorry, but okay. What I mean by that is that we don't need it to be a word or a thing in a world or a society where it just is. That is the way. The fact that we take it, we ball it up, and we put it over here in this corner, in this section, and you can get interested in it or not. Are you into this? No. No, wait. This is so integral, and not to say that this is more important than anything else. It's just like, but it is. It is. Everybody knows this experience. I know I'm preaching to the choir somewhat, but I'm also trying to reach other people here. Like I'm one of you too. I was the hippie kid that was raised by Native Americans and Sufi dancers and Unitarians and Earth Tribe, and was like, screw this hippie crap. I want to be a stockbroker. No, what I really mean is I hate money. I hated those people, but I was really frustrated at how they self-enclaved and just got into these little cliques that get to sniffing each other's butts like dogs, like, and that closes and becomes something smaller, right? It doesn't reach more people, and in a way, society and government is structured this way, and there's research and development that went into how this happened. Agent provocateurs, all of this kind of stuff, since the hippies and before that, the Bolsheviks and everything. Not the Bolsheviks, but socialists, which is just, not, red letter socialists, but social democrats, people that just believe that the world should be structured in a way that benefits everybody and allows that any child can come in, and let's say we get the next Albert Einstein, or we get the next this or that or who, Madame Curie, and so forth, that you have all these stories of these people coming in through pauperhood, through poor conditions, and yet they become this amazing genius that invents some amazing thing. Would that happen today? You take this idea of letting, and a lot of people are fond of saying the world was so much harder back then. Well, I mean, shoot, in the 1960s and 70s, when we actually had a decent corporate tax rate, we had a functioning society, high schools, and everybody had more than enough money. Space exploration and research into new forms of agriculture had all of this money because of an enemy, and that has to change. And a lot of people are saying, well, if we had this enemy of climate change, well, no, don't make climate change an enemy. Okay, don't, because you will kill this world if you treat it as another war. Because you treat it as something that needs to be conquered or won, because much of climate change is related to the ecosystem and the ecosystem's response to modification by human beings. So it sounds like splitting hairs, but it's important. Just like, as it turns out, the difference between sustainability and regeneration is important, though I can't change my name anymore, Facebook. Thanks. I have to make this new thing, and that's cool too. Um, it's important because if you operate in that way, you might end up cutting off different, amputate the leg, cut the leg, or you'll lose the body, that kind of thing. And crazy stuff like people saying they want to kill the sea lions now up here because they're eating too many of the salmon, and now there's not enough salmon for the orca. Well, that is just insane. It's not the sea lions, damn it. It's the dams and the glyphosate and the flame retardants and the fossil fuels and the everything, but especially the dams in this case. To my point, you see what I mean, how quickly even ecologically sensitive people can jump to a conclusion like cause a local extinction of this or that species because it's lacking. The ecosystem is lacking abundance from human resources. And now you have all these animals and plants and ecosystems and habitats that are refugees from human activity, barely getting on, barely surviving. And because this or that piece of the ecosystem isn't functioning properly, you punish them, remove the weeds, remove this, remove that, rather than thinking, wait, this is happening because of the carbon loss, because of the mineral loss, because of the erosion, because there's not enough tree cover, because there's a thermodynamic shift happening and too much heat forming over the land, and it's causing giant thunderheads to form off the ocean from all of this heat from a warmed ocean. And they're staying out there until they literally, boom, have to come into land, because that's what they do. And when they do, they're full of giant hailstones. So there's a giant hailstorm in the Midwest in the middle of the summer. Fires everywhere. It's the fossil fuels, it's the tree removal. You got Jay Inslee going up there trying to be president, talking about climate change, talking about changing the fossil fuel industry. Okay, the forestry policy in Washington state is one of the best, but it's still ridiculous. They're removing trees, they're planting monocropped road trees, all the same age, in massive plantations, and then, which is like just barely recovering. Okay, that's not even, it's doing some good. I'm not saying it's doing no good, but then they're just reaping them off and basically just using the land as a machine. They're keeping some areas wild and stuff like that. But, selling trees and look at the books and tell me that it's breaking even. Come on, when you see these huge clear-cut areas, look in my face, look in my eyes and tell me that it's breaking even, that we're not losing biomass, that this drought is not related to literally selling living biomass and those things which hold the water and hold the life to the land being sold to produce energy in China for manufacturing, which also produces even more greenhouse gases and also produces its own kind of toxicities. And it's being burned into smoke and CO2 into the atmosphere. Tell me that that is an ecologically wise decision, Mr. Governor Jay Inslee. Love lots of other things about you, but you are a politician first and an ecologist second, and you need to come clean with people, or adopt a strategy that encourages saving and expanding biodiverse living systems with lots of parts. Or else you're just another guy saying that you love this place and us and the earth, but you're really pocketing money from fossil fuel developers and frackers. So everybody needs to, there is a pledge out there. Politicians, it's political season. We're here to save the earth. Okay, it's not all politics, but if you sit this one out, and if you just stay on your farms and you don't go at least vote, you may end up being responsible. I mean, the apathy and the feeling that we can't change things, when obviously we can. Obviously, weird stuff can happen. People can show up in Congress and piss off the establishment so badly that we're from just beginnings like us. These things are happening. You can be involved. Policy, philosophy, action, regeneration. I think I'm about ready to sign off, but I appreciate you guys listening. Appreciate you all watching. There's going to be more. There's going to be videos, other videos. There's going to be conversations, graphics. This is just a heart-to-heart, me, you, and this. And if you like it, please subscribe. Please like the video. Please get notifications. All of that down there.